The 90-Day Fiancé universe just delivered three completely different kinds of relationship chaos. There are few reality TV franchises capable of producing three major relationship mysteries at once. One couple appears to be moving toward a wedding, while viewers are still watching the relationship fall apart on television. Another relationship collapsed after secret online conversations and explicit messages were discovered. And one of the franchise's longest-running couples is now facing perhaps its most serious test yet, with fans wondering whether the marriage has finally reached its breaking point. That is where Marissa and Edward Gomez, Colt Johnson and Courtney Reardans, and Rebecca Parrott and Zied Hakimi come into the picture. And the latest information makes all three stories considerably more complicated than a simple together or broken up headline. Marissa and Edward's story has produced one of the most interesting contradictions of the current season. On television, viewers are watching Marissa question whether Edward can fit into her world. Yet publicly available wedding registry information appears to point toward a marriage outcome that the episodes have not reached yet. TLC's own season 12 material describes their relationship as a clash between Marissa's established Pennsylvania lifestyle and Edward's very different background in the Dominican Republic. Colt's story is considerably less mysterious. His relationship with Courtney ended after she discovered that he had been communicating with another woman, Diana, including explicit material. Courtney eventually moved on and became engaged to another man, while Colt's relationship with Diana became the next chapter of his increasingly complicated romantic life. And then there is Rebecca and Zied. For years, they have been one of the franchise's most recognizable couples. But on season 3 of The Last Resort, their old disagreements over culture, expectations, work, marriage, and trust have returned with a vengeance. Recent reports have described their relationship as being under severe pressure, while other evidence, including social media activity, has suggested they may have reconciled after filming. So what is actually happening? Let's break down all three stories. Part 1. Marissa and Edward, the wedding reveal that changes everything. Marissa's story looks very different when you know what happens later. When Marissa first entered season 12 of 90 Day Fiancé, she looked like someone who had already built a very specific life. She had a successful career. She had children. She had an established home. She had a sophisticated social circle. She had experience in the bridal industry. And she had already been married once. Edward Gomez, meanwhile, arrived from the Dominican Republic with a very different background. TLC's official description of the couple says Marissa balances a high-powered New York career with raising 2 sons in Pennsylvania, while Edward worked as a hotel concierge in the Dominican Republic. The network specifically highlighted the challenge of Edward fitting into Marissa's world and dealing with judgment from her former husband and skepticism from her family. That difference became one of the central themes of their season. But there is a major piece of information fans need to understand. Marissa and Edward appear to have actually gotten married. A publicly accessible Zola wedding registry is listed under Edward and Marissa, and recent social media posts have circulated claiming that the pair are married, even though the current episodes are still showing the period before the wedding. That does not necessarily tell us every detail of the wedding. It does, however, provide a powerful indication that the couple's televised uncertainty did not prevent them from reaching marriage. And suddenly, the entire season looks different. The marriage question. One of the most fascinating aspects of 90 Day Fiancé is that the audience often watches a relationship in the wrong chronological order. The episodes may show the couple arguing about whether they should marry, but viewers may already know that the people eventually got married. That creates a strange experience. Every argument becomes a question. How did they get from here to the wedding? Every disagreement becomes more interesting. Every emotional conversation becomes a clue. And with Marissa and Edward, the contrast is particularly striking. The current season has shown Marissa struggling with how Edward fits into her life. She is worried about how he behaves around her friends. She has been protective of her reputation. She has questioned whether he can adapt to the American lifestyle she has built. And Edward has increasingly appeared frustrated by what he perceives as pressure to become someone different. The result is a relationship that can look extremely unstable on television. Yet the available wedding information suggests that instability did not necessarily lead to a breakup. Marissa's never again confession. There is another reason the wedding reveal is so significant. Marissa previously said she had promised herself that she would never marry again. In an interview with Swan, she explained that her previous marriage had been emotionally difficult and that she had reached the point where she did not want to repeat the experience. That makes Edward's arrival even more important. This wasn't simply a woman deciding whether to marry a new boyfriend. It was a woman who had already decided marriage might not be for her. She had built a life after divorce. She had children. She had a career. She had independence. And then Edward changed her thinking. According to Marissa's account, the relationship developed after they met during a trip to the Dominican Republic. Their initial meeting happened at a karaoke bar, according to her interview with Swan. They later lost touch before reconnecting during another trip. That detail matters. Their relationship wasn't simply a random online romance. There was an in-person connection. They had an opportunity to experience each other outside the pressure of American reality television. And eventually, Marissa decided the relationship was worth risking her previous vow. How Marissa and Edward really met. The karaoke bar story is almost too perfect for a 90-day fiancé couple. Marissa was on a girls' trip. Edward was working in the Dominican Republic. They met. They connected. Then they lost contact. Years, or at least significant time. Later, their paths crossed again. And this time, the connection became serious. Marissa has explained that the relationship grew after they reconnected. The story is important because it shows why she became emotionally attached to Edward despite their enormous differences. She wasn't simply choosing someone based on a dating profile. She had a memory of meeting him. She had a real-world connection. And she apparently felt something that was strong enough to overcome the practical objections. The biggest problem, their lifestyles. The biggest challenge isn't necessarily age. It isn't necessarily distance. It isn't even culture. It's lifestyle. Marissa's life is highly structured. Her professional identity is extremely important to her. Her social environment matters. Her family has expectations. Her children are part of every major decision. Edward is entering that world from a completely different background. That means every ordinary decision becomes a negotiation. How should he dress? How should he behave around her friends? What should he do professionally? How independent should he be? How much should he adapt? And perhaps the most important question, does Edward need to become more like Marissa? Or does Marissa need to accept Edward as he is? That question has become one of the defining issues of their season. Marissa's defense, I want him to thrive. Marissa has faced significant criticism from viewers who believe she is controlling Edward. But she has rejected that characterization. In an interview with Swan, Marissa explained that she doesn't believe she is trying to control Edward. Instead, she said she wants him to thrive in America and become the best version of himself. She described her involvement as guidance rather than control. That distinction is important. Marissa sees herself as helping. Edward may experience that help differently. And that difference in perception can become a serious relationship problem. Because control and guidance can look almost identical depending on who is receiving them. If Marissa says, I'm trying to help you succeed, Edward may hear, you aren't good enough as you are. And that is where resentment begins. The family problem. Marissa's family adds another layer. TLC specifically described her family as upper crust and emphasized that Edward would have to deal with judgment from her ex-husband and skepticism from her parents. That is a difficult position for any fiancé. Imagine arriving in a new country. You are already nervous. You don't have your normal support system. You are living with your partner. And then you meet the family, and they aren't sure you're good enough. That can make someone defensive. It can also make the American partner feel caught in the middle. Marissa has to balance Edward's feelings, her parents' opinions, her ex-husband's concerns, her children's needs, and her own expectations. That's a lot of pressure. The ex-husband question. Marissa's former husband, Michael, is also part of the story. According to Swan, Marissa married Michael Sanders in 2012 and the couple divorced around 2018. They continued to co-parent their two sons. That means Edward isn't simply entering Marissa's life. He's entering a family system that already exists. There are children. There is an ex. There are established routines. There are parenting responsibilities. There are financial considerations. And there are years of history Edward cannot possibly replicate. For Edward, the challenge isn't simply proving that he loves Marissa. He has to demonstrate that he can become part of the life she already built. The wedding registry clue. Now we arrive at the biggest reveal. A Zola registry is publicly listed for Edward and Marissa, with household and wedding-related items appearing on the page. That is a meaningful clue because a wedding registry is fundamentally different from a fan theory. A fan can speculate. A blogger can speculate. A social media commenter can speculate. A public registry, however, is a concrete piece of information. It doesn't tell us every detail about when or where they married, but it strongly suggests that the relationship progressed toward marriage. And that means viewers watching the current season may already know the ending, even if the show hasn't reached it yet. Did Marissa really go through with the wedding? Based on the currently available public evidence, yes, the evidence strongly indicates that Marissa and Edward married. Recent social media posts have explicitly described them as married, while the registry provides additional supporting evidence. However, because some of the social media material is fan-driven rather than a direct statement from the couple, it is better to describe the wedding as strongly indicated rather than claim every wedding detail as independently confirmed. That distinction matters. The evidence tells us where the relationship appears to have gone. The television episodes show us how difficult the road was. Why the wedding makes the current season more interesting. Knowing that Marissa and Edward apparently married changes the viewer's perspective. When Marissa complains about Edward's behavior, viewers may think, how did they get past this? When Edward feels criticized, viewers may wonder, what changed? When Marissa questions whether he can fit into her world, viewers ask, did Edward eventually find his place? And when her family expresses doubt, viewers know there must eventually be a moment when Marissa makes a final decision. The drama isn't simply, will they marry? It's, how did they manage to get there? Part 2. Colt's DM drama. If Marissa and Edward represent a relationship that appears to survive its problems, Colt Johnson and Courtney Reardans represent the opposite. Their relationship became a case study in how quickly online communication can destroy trust. And the details are brutal. Colt and Courtney started with promise. Colt and Courtney met through 90-day hunt for love. Their relationship became serious. Despite Colt's injury during filming, Courtney stayed involved. Eventually, they left the show together. Then they moved into Courtney's parents' home in Florida. The arrangement was unusual. Colt wasn't simply dating Courtney. He was living with Courtney. He was living with her parents. And Courtney was helping him recover from a serious leg injury. That created an enormous level of emotional dependence. According to Courtney's own comments, their life together was wild, and she expected the single life to reveal a more vulnerable side of their relationship. But underneath that apparent closeness was a problem. Colt was still talking to another woman. The DMs that changed everything. Colt had been communicating online with Diana, a woman from Brazil. According to reporting about the season, Courtney discovered that Colt was not simply exchanging innocent messages. The communication included explicit content. Courtney said he had been sexting another woman while living under her parents' roof. That transformed the story. This wasn't simply, my boyfriend follows another woman. It wasn't, he liked someone's Instagram photo. It wasn't even, he was flirting online. According to Courtney's account, the messages had crossed into explicit sexual communication. And because Colt was living with her and receiving her support while this was happening, Courtney viewed the behavior as a profound betrayal. The phone check. One of the most explosive elements of the storyline came when Courtney's friends encouraged her to check Colt's phone. She already had doubts. She had reasons to wonder whether he was telling her everything. Then she found the messages. According to Swan, Courtney said she discovered that Colt had been cheating on her throughout the relationship. The discovery gave her something that suspicion never can. Evidence. And that distinction matters. For days or weeks, a partner may wonder whether something is wrong. After discovering messages, the question changes. It becomes, what am I going to do about what I just found? Courtney's anger. Courtney's response was explosive. She confronted Colt. She accused him of cheating. She kicked him out. And she made it clear that she felt deeply disrespected. Us Weekly reported that Courtney later discussed learning that Colt had been in Brazil with Diana, while she believed he was elsewhere, and that she knew he had been sending explicit videos. That detail is especially damaging because it suggests that the deception wasn't limited to private messages. There was also a question of where Colt actually was. The caregiver dynamic. This is what makes the situation emotionally complicated. Courtney wasn't simply Colt's girlfriend. She had become his caregiver. After his injury, she helped him. She brought him into her family home. She supported him during recovery. She invested time and energy into someone she believed was her partner. Then she discovered that he was maintaining another sexual connection that can create a very specific kind of anger. It's not simply jealousy. It's, I was taking care of you while you were doing this behind my back. That is why Courtney's reaction was so intense. Colt's explanation. Colt eventually connected his relationship with Diana to his broader romantic journey. According to Swen, he had been chatting with Diana online before his relationship with Courtney was fully established, then resumed communication after returning from Hunt for Love. This creates a complicated timeline. When does talking become cheating? Does a person have an obligation to stop communicating with someone else when they become exclusive? What if they never explicitly define exclusivity? Those questions can be debated, but Courtney's position was clear. Once Colt was living with her and presenting himself as her boyfriend, continuing sexual communication with another woman crossed the line. Diana's side makes the story even messier. Diana was not necessarily aware of the entire situation. Coverage of the season indicates that she did not initially understand that Colt was in a relationship with Courtney. That is significant, because if Diana genuinely believed Colt was available, she may have been participating in something she didn't realize was betrayal. When she later learned about the circumstances, she reportedly questioned whether she was simply being treated as a backup option. That created a bizarre triangle. Courtney felt betrayed. Diana felt deceived. Colt was caught between the two. The backup option problem. Diana's concerns exposed something bigger. If Colt was talking to Diana while dating Courtney, what did he actually want? Was Diana the real relationship? Was Courtney the real relationship? Was Colt simply keeping multiple possibilities open? Or was he emotionally unable to commit to one person? Those questions became central to the story, because cheating isn't always about wanting another person. Sometimes it's about wanting every option. And that's exactly what destroys trust. Courtney eventually walked away. The relationship ended. Courtney moved forward. And eventually, she met another man. His name is Phil. He is significantly older than her. Us Weekly reported that Courtney introduced Phil as her new boyfriend, describing him as 66 years old while she was 34. The age gap naturally generated attention. But for Courtney, the more important issue appeared to be stability. After her experience with Colt, she wanted something different. Courtney's engagement. The story went even further. Courtney became engaged to Phil. The Daily Beast reported that she announced the engagement and described the couple as planning their future together. That creates a remarkable contrast. Courtney went from, I caught my boyfriend sexting another woman, to, I'm engaged to someone else. Her relationship with Colt therefore appears to have become a painful chapter rather than her final destination. But Courtney still helped Colt. Here's where things get weird again. Even after Colt cheated, Courtney continued to care about him. She picked him up. She remained in contact. And after their breakup, Colt even ended up living with Courtney and her new boyfriend for a period of time. Swen reported that Courtney explained why she allowed Colt back into her life, even after the cheating. This sounds unbelievable until you understand how emotional bonds work. A person can know someone is bad for them romantically and still care about them as a human being. Courtney had seen Colt injured. She had cared for him. She had lived with him. Their relationship had created emotional attachment. Ending the romance didn't necessarily erase that attachment overnight. Colt's divorce, another major development in Colt's broader relationship history, came in 2026. Cinema Blend reported that Colt finalized his divorce from Vanessa Guerra after the couple had separated in 2024, based on court documents he shared. That timing is interesting because Colt was simultaneously navigating the new relationship drama shown on The Single Life. It meant that several chapters of his romantic history were overlapping. Past marriage, recent relationship, new relationship, online communication, and now another potential future. For fans, it's another example of why Colt's love life remains one of the franchise's most complicated. Colt and Diana, where did they end up? By the tell-all, Colt and Diana were still together according to Swin's relationship update. But the relationship began under extraordinary circumstances. Diana was connected to Colt while he was still with Courtney. Courtney discovered the communication. Colt traveled to Brazil, and Diana had to decide whether she trusted him. That is not exactly the ideal foundation for a stable relationship. The question becomes whether Colt can finally break the pattern. Part 3. Rebecca and Zied, the breakup clues. Now we come to the couple whose current status is perhaps the most difficult to interpret. Rebecca Parrott and Zied Hakimi have been through almost every kind of 90-day fiancé obstacle. Age difference, culture clash, family concerns, religious differences, previous marriages, visa issues, jealousy, financial pressure, work disagreements, and now, serious marital conflict. They are currently featured on 90 Day, The Last Resort Season 3, and their relationship looks increasingly fragile. The old story. Rebecca and Zied first appeared together on 90 Day Fiancé, before the 90 days. Their relationship immediately attracted attention because of the age difference and Rebecca's history with foreign partners. Rebecca had previously been married multiple times. She also had a particularly difficult experience with a previous Moroccan husband. That history affected how she approached Zied. She was determined not to repeat the past. Zied, meanwhile, was much younger and came from a different cultural and religious environment. The couple had to navigate those differences from the beginning. The secret that almost destroyed them. One of the earliest major problems involved Rebecca's previous marriage. She had not finalized her divorce when she became involved with Zied. That created enormous tension. Zied had his own expectations about marriage. Rebecca wanted to move forward, but the past was still legally present. Eventually, Rebecca's divorce was finalized, and the couple continued. The wedding. The couple eventually married. Reality TV World reported that by 2021, Zied was a married man living with Rebecca in Georgia, with evidence from their social media activity suggesting they were still together. At the time, their relationship looked surprisingly resilient. They had survived the visa process. They had survived family skepticism. They had survived cultural differences. They had survived Rebecca's previous marriage drama. They had survived wedding disagreements. And they were still together. But marriage created new problems. The biggest relationship issue now isn't whether Zied loves Rebecca. It's whether their expectations of marriage are compatible. On The Last Resort, Zied has expressed frustration over what he sees as Rebecca's approach to being a wife. Rebecca, meanwhile, has argued that she works extensively to support their household. That disagreement reveals a fundamental cultural difference. Zied appears to have expectations rooted partly in the traditional gender roles he grew up around. Rebecca expects a partnership that recognizes her professional responsibilities. Neither perspective automatically makes someone a villain. But if the two people can't agree on what marriage should look like, resentment builds. The campfire blow-up. One of the most important moments came during a survival exercise involving a campfire. Recent coverage described a major confrontation. Rebecca expressed feeling unloved. Zied criticized her for not meeting his expectations of a wife. Rebecca pushed back by emphasizing how much she works to support their life. The argument exposed the depth of their resentment. This wasn't just a fight about chores. It was a fight about identity. Rebecca was essentially asking, "Do you appreciate what I contribute?" Zied was asking, "Are you willing to be the kind of wife I expected?" Those are two very different questions. The not